we put a poll out yesterday saying who is the best British heavyweight ever. Tyson Fury, Lennox Lewis, or other was an option as well. Not many people picked other. I think it was maybe 2%, and it was quite evenly split between Tyson Fury and Lennox Lewis. So I think that's most people. Yeah, so most people are having those two as the top two British heavyweights of all time as things stand. However, that's up for debate as well. Out of all three fights that we're going to discuss, this is the one I'm kind of most looking forward to discussing with you. I think we're going to get a difference of opinions here. Lennox Lewis was 41-2 and 1 draw, had quite a high KO percentage as well, not as high as Mike Tyson's, but high enough. Beat Mike Tyson, had fights against Evander Holyfield as well, beat Vitaly Klitschko to kind of round off in his career, albeit in controversial circumstances. Lost to Oliver McCall, lost to Hasim Rahman, came back and beat both by stoppage. But yeah, that would have been a great fight, and one I would have loved to have seen. Greg, going to go to you first on this one. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's just underrated how clever Lennox Lewis actually was, and I think he had a better jab than Tyson Fury. I know Tyson Fury's a big guy and all that kind of thing, but I see Lennox Lewis winning without too many problems, and that's not been disrespectful to Tyson Fury. Lennox Lewis is so clever. His jab, he knew how to range somebody. He fought bigger guys. Right, he didn't have the greatest night of his career against Vitaly Klitschko, but Lewis is basically done when he fought Klitschko, let's be honest. And what height was Vitaly? 6'8"?
Something like
that. He started like hurting Vitaly. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the highlights from it, but you ever seen the uppercut that Lewis catches him with? I mean, my God, like I know Tyson Fury's got a decent chin if he gets up from Wilder, but I'll be honest, Elliot, I know that some of you guys are like really pro Fury in that fight, and again, it's hard to disagree with some of the height advantages and the skill levels, but I just see that being not a really comfortable night's work for Lennox Lewis, but I just think he's too good. There's just a little bit he's got too much IQ. I think we look a little bit too much into Tyson. Let's be honest, he's dancing rings round Deontay Wilder, who's got no feet. He's beat Dillian White, who I don't know what Dillian White was doing on Saturday, but it certainly didn't look like he was there to win anyway, with the greatest of respect. Klitschko cannot take anything away from him. What a performance. But I think Klitschko underestimated him. But I still can't take anything away from that performance. I was like so pro Fury that night, so proud of him. I just think there's levels to Lennox Lewis. So Lennox Lewis for me.
And would you be confident that Lennox Lewis would stop Tyson Fury? Is that how you would see that fight going, rather than going the distance? Or
the strange thing is, no, I can't see Lennox Lewis stopping him, but I think we're underestimating here a little bit. Is see when bigger guys get hurt, they slow down and they start getting closer to you. Lennox Lewis had a really good inside game with those uppercuts and things, so I could see him maybe hurting Tyson and put him into a bit of a shell and outpointing him. I can see him stopping him, but he was a huge puncher as well, Lennox Lewis. Like, he's probably my favourite knockout of all time, and that's the rematch against Rahman. That's how you put somebody to sleep after the upset, isn't it? So yeah, I think Lennox Lewis for me, personally, Elliot, but it's a good debate.
Okay, Elliot, Greg.
Don't do this to me. I think let me do my zip up to get myself in the mindset of this. I think so. You put that poll out yesterday. And I was in order, because I knew Greg would be of this opinion, and I don't want to. I'm not disagreeing with anyone just for the sake of disagreeing. What I was looking at essentially was I was thinking, because I remember Lennox Lewis, like watching Fury Lewis's fights, kind of when first getting into sort of boxing. I was thinking, am I looking at this through romantic New Day eyes of Tyson Fury because it's fresher? I don't want to go back and look at some fights. I went back. I've looked at yesterday. I watched Lewis in both the Holyfield fights. Watched him against Klitschko. Watched him against Galotta and Tyson and Ruddock. And I think, to be honest, the thing that strikes me here is this where I'm standing on it. I think Lennox Lewis, elite fighter, but I almost feel like it's elite in that time. And I think, but when I watch those sort of heavyweight boxing fights, it's almost like the style of heavyweight boxing has changed since then. And I don't know whether, Greg, would you agree with this, but it was almost like you're getting guys essentially just kind of more flat-footed, essentially just planting themselves, sort of giving it a double jab and then just swinging power shots. And then essentially, if you miss, you hold for a bit. And then by sort of round 6, well, maybe a bit early, but by sort of 7 to 8, they're both blowing essentially. You're hanging off the ropes and you're just slugging essentially. And I think for me, that's where I feel like I don't see Tyson Fury fitting into that. I think his style is obviously different, but I think also heavyweight boxing is different. I don't think like someone like AJ, for example, would stand there and fight like that either. So it's almost like it's hard for me to see how this one's going to play out, because it's almost like I don't see Fury standing there in the same way that like Holyfield stood there. I know you also have like Klitschko and Lewis, obviously, like, you know, Lewis is coming to the end there as well. So obviously fitness, whatever plays a part, but kind of literally standing as they were, trading like that. So that's why I feel it's hard. And again, obviously the size difference isn't actually as profound as it was with the other guys, which is why I think this is the closest of the three. I can't sit here and say with any confidence that I'd back either man, like, you know, 70-30 to beat the other one. I just somehow feel like Fury could outpoint him. This is what I feel. And then I think, don't get me wrong, I think if Lewis, the improvements in, like, you know, sports science, whatever approach, whatever, made him a sort of fitter fighter, and he was fighting essentially in today's world, it might be very different. But I just feel like Fury has shown fitness over fight distance. I don't think Lewis has. So I just feel like Fury would take rounds, especially down the back end of the fight, and I think he'd outpoint him. From my opinion.
So, do you know, it's hard to disagree with it. All I would say is that I think that generation, what was different is they actually hit each other. But Dylan White didn't even hit him on Saturday. See, when you get hit, it does naturally slow you down, because you're apprehensive about getting hit again. Or if you get hit in the body, you do this thing where you try and hide it. It's quite funny. You hit in the body and you make that noise and you go, right, I'm fine, but you actually can't move your legs. And I think that's maybe what some of the heavyweights used to do. I think they were capable of hurting each other. I mean, you think of the guys you mentioned there, Tyson, Holyfield. Holyfield for me is the greatest cruiserweight of all time. You know, him and Usyk, it's a toss-up, isn't it? But these guys were all very, very capable, whereas Wilder's got a great punch. Klitschko, fantastic, cannot fault Klitschko. I don't really have anything bad to say about that one, so I feel I need to leave that one out. But I just feel Fury's had it a little bit too much his own way all his career. He's never had somebody who's really, really put it on him, you know. He's a guys who have knocked him down like Wilder, but they're not clever enough to sustain it and stay close to him. But do you know what? I see a scenario where Tyson Fury outpoints Lennox Lewis, so I can't disagree with you, which is probably why we're talking about this, isn't it? It's quite interesting. So yeah, I can see all points, man. I can see.
Let me ask you something as well. Just because
rubbish,
there was a lot of talk actually about some people trying to compare or trying to actually fit Frank Bruno into kind of today's heavyweight scene, where he would actually fit. And if you talk about obviously Lewis, Tyson, those guys, obviously Tyson destroying Bruno essentially, but Lewis also beating Bruno. And then some people were trying to draw that sense that he would be kind of above Dillian White and maybe like around that kind of AJ level. Do you reckon are you looking at it romantically, or do you reckon that he would fit up there, or do you reckon as a win you can almost look at it and go, was Bruno the kind of White/Chisora type character of that generation, or is that doing him a disservice as well?
It's difficult, but Tyson, people really don't give Frank Bruno enough respect. Frank Bruno was a good fighter, and listen, he had Mike Tyson all over the place, and see if he knew how to put his foot in the gas, it would have stopped him. But he didn't have that killer instinct, Frank Bruno. He had an unbelievable shot, such a heavy-handed guy, but he just didn't quite have that. It's weird because I think guys like Tyson Fury, Lennox Lewis, they're probably, with the greatest of respect, leagues above Frank Bruno. But I think Frank Bruno's leagues above guys like Dillian White and things like that as well. So it's hard to kind of know where to put him. But no, I agree with you. I just think that Frank Bruno just didn't have that killer. See if he had the size and he is. See if he had that Mike Tyson thing, probably be. We're talking about a different fighter. He just didn't have that killer instinct. Great laugh though.
Yeah. We'll go to Paul in one moment. Would anyone here disagree with the statement saying that Lennox Lewis would be Tyson Fury's toughest fight so far?
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Is this based on the three fighters that we're going to discuss?
No, like out of all of Tyson Fury's fights he's had so far, would Lennox Lewis be his toughest fight?
Oh, but with the attributes it brings, night and day. Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice one. Paul, gonna finish off with you on this one, mate. Let me know what your thoughts are on the fight and what you think would have happened.
I'm conscious we don't want to go on for too long, because I know we've got another one to talk about after this as well. But I can hear what both the guys are saying, and funny, they both make points which I do agree with, and ones that I perhaps hadn't thought of as well. But in terms of my prediction, I've been siding with Greg here, and I really do think Lennox Lewis would give Fury the toughest night's work. And the only thing I'm disagreeing with is I could see a world in which he would stop him. And the reason I'm saying that is you've seen Fury get hurt. You know, he's been on the floor 6 times in his career, 4 to Wilder. And although Elliot, you said about the footwork and stuff, in the generation past perhaps wasn't as good, in Fury's footwork's night and day compared to all of theirs. But I just think that if you're comparing Lennox Lewis to Deontay Wilder, I'm thinking Deontay Wilder got him down a couple of times and couldn't finish him, and Fury's powers of recovery were really good. I think Lennox Lewis was smart enough, his feet are better than Wilder's, and he had that know-how, and I think that he would have been able to, had he been able to get Fury on the ground and on the deck. I think the only difference there is that Lewis would have been able to finish him. So I would say that I completely see why Greg thinks that it would maybe go the distance, or Fury maybe would survive. But I can see a world in which Lennox Lewis does break down Tyson Fury, knocks him down a couple of times, and does push for the stoppage win.
Interesting, yeah. So one of these things where there's just a bit of frustration, because this is a fantasy fight. We're never obviously going to find out the answer to this question. And it's can be hotly debated amongst other people, I'm sure. But really interesting.
Before we move on, Stoke, can I just ask: is it 2-2? Like, what's your opinion on this? Is it 2-2, or am I been hammered 3-1 on the prediction of that fight?
This is the only one that I'm not willing to give an answer on. You can try and push.
I think I said that I thought that Lennox Lewis could stop Tyson Fury, but I just didn't. I thought it was maybe unlikely, but I totally agree with you. I can see it slowing down, that uppercut.
Yeah.
Funny dance, but yeah, sorry, Elliot, you take it forward. I want to hear what you've got to say. Don't want this sitting on the fence. I want a name.
Like, it's a really tricky one. What I'd like to do is go to like a cinema and watch like Lennox Lewis's best performances, and then kind of compare that to Tyson Fury's, and really look into it a bit more, because it's one thing looking at like a highlight reel or reading into it, but it's another thing seeing Lennox Lewis in action. He's not of my generation. He's not of Paul's generation. Maybe you two, maybe so, because you're a bit older. But it's difficult when when you're talking about a different generation and you're looking at past fights or not. But I just feel like with Fury, I think Fury's incredibly difficult to beat because of a number of reasons. But if there was one man to do it, I think it would be Lennox Lewis. In terms of who would have won, it's so difficult. It's incredibly difficult. I'm a big fan of both.
Which the guys who are letting him off with that?
Yeah. Got
okay, we'll give
not
you
got much time left.
that was good enough.